Now, I've featured Chris in a video before, and I ended up working with him for just a couple of sessions. He went to university, he's come back 6 months later, and his forehand has improved a little bit, but I'm going to show you how I was able to improve it a little bit more throughout the course of this one session. Now, just before we get started, my job as a coach is to get players to improve and make adjustments, not necessarily changes, but adjustments as simple as possible so that they understand it, they can feel it, and they can go and play points and compete without feeling like they're ever getting worse. So whether you're a 3-0 or a pro player or a college player, I don't want you to feel like you're getting worse for any period of time. I want it to be comfortable. So I know that sometimes you might watch a video and think, oh, I can explain this a little bit more and you go into more detail. That is not my point. I am trying to get this done in the simplest way possible. So if we take a look at Chris's forehand from the beginning of the session, we need to notice how much he's just pulling from the shoulder. So the kinetic chain really isn't there. There's not a lot of separation through the arm. He's just lowering the racket. It's a little stiff. He sometimes locks out the arm here. So he's not supinating the arm and he's not laying the wrist back. He's just pulling here from the shoulder. Now it's going to be very difficult. Obviously I can explain to him what it should look like, what the slot looks like, all this stuff. All sounds great, but he's built up the relationship between his shoulder, the racket and the ball to where if he starts moving and throwing that arm at it and laying the wrist back a lot, it's going to be very difficult for him to figure out where that racket now is in relationship to the tennis ball. And he's not going to be able to play at the level that he's currently playing at unless he spends a lot of time trying to figure it all out. So my job is to try and give him something that's a little bit easier, that he can feel and maybe just develop over time so it can improve gradually. Again, this shot here, patting the dog, locking out the arm, not using the wrist, pulling from the shoulder. So we're going to see what we can do to help him to make this a more efficient forehand. So this is what his forehand looked like towards the end of the session, and what I was trying to have him do is to lower the racket here with a bent arm and to not think about ever getting into the pat the dog position, rather to lower the racket and supinate the arm into this position. Now I made a video on pat the dog and everyone's telling me, oh, the pros do it, the pros do it. I get it. He's also going to do it. He's doing it, but I don't want him to get stuck in that position. I don't want him to even think about it. It's going to happen naturally as it does with all the players. I'm sure Roger Federer didn't spend 6 months patting dogs. It's just something that happens naturally throughout the swing. Now I want him to just lower the arm here, lower the racket, sorry, with a bent arm, and then just think about supinating the arm, right? Which is what's happening here. He's supinating the arm. Now the strings face we can see the strings a little bit, which is definitely useful. So it becomes more of a throwing motion, which if you were to skim a stone across a pond, you would use more of this motion rather than pulling it from the shoulder. So now he's developed a throwing motion rather than a sort of clothesline WWE move where he's throwing it from the shoulder. Now as he gets more comfortable with this, he can start to throw the arm at the shot a little more violently, and now you see how he's getting a bit more separation in the wrist. He's using it a little bit more so he can release into the shot, really create again that throwing motion. You can see on this one here where he's dropping the racket, the strings are facing the floor, but now he's going to supinate, and because he's doing it with a bit of momentum, he's creating that lag. And the great thing about this is he can regulate how much he wants to throw the arm at the shot and how much he doesn't, but he can always create that sort of kinetic chain and somewhat of separation where he's able to use the different parts of his arm rather than just using his shoulder. One way of getting this across to Chris and getting him to feel the sensation of throwing the arm at the ball and actually supinating and doing the forehand basic that I've been speaking about is to actually throw a ball sidearm. So if you were skimming a stone across a pond, you would end up with a very similar technique than the forehand. Now it's a little different if it's like Federer or Nadal, where they have a straight arm at the point of contact. But this new forehand that he's got is very much like a throwing motion. Even though that's slightly exaggerated with how far he leads with the elbow, that's the feeling that he's going to have to try and create when he's out there. And I believe that this, trying to figure out and feel these little sensations as you're playing, is so much easier than someone explaining all this stuff to you and you're trying to like process it. You know, if you can actually think about the sensation of, hey, I'm just going to keep my arm bent and I'm going to throw my arm at the ball. Keep my arm bent, throw my arm at the ball. That's about as simple as it's ever going to get to make the adjustments that we've seen Chris make here. And I think that this really helped him to actually change and create that kinetic chain where now his arm is working far more effectively. If you would like me to help you with your game, you can send me a video via tpatennis.com. I'll check out the video. We'll schedule a time to get online. You'll be able to view my screen as I analyze your video. You're also free to ask me any questions you may have, and I will give you some tips to take your game to the next level.